Thank you all for taking time out of your day to be here with us. We know you're all very busy and we have a great turnout. My name is Diana Borns. I am the president of Ascendle and I will be your moderator today. Today's topic, when outsourced software development makes sense, will be presented by Dave Todaro, CEO of Ascendle. So let me just take a moment to introduce Ascendle. For those of you who don't know us, Ascendle is a leader in custom software development. We partner with companies as their full service development team to create mobile and web applications to drive their business goals. We offer web, app, and platform development, along with product strategy, product design, and agile training services. Here are just a few of our clients. As you can see, we work with a wide variety, from early stage startup to some of the largest companies in the world. And we are recognized experts in our field, and we love to share our many years of experience by teaching others. We have spoken to thousands of people around the world, presenting regularly with a variety of organizations at many different types of events. And yes, we wrote the book. Dave spent 2 years to capture everything we know about agile development, and in 2019 published the 500-page epic guide to agile. Our presenter today is Dave Todaro, CEO of Ascendle. For the last 35 years, Dave has been a technology leader involved in all aspects of product vision, software engineering, and entrepreneurship. Dave, I'll go ahead and hand the mic over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Di. And again, thank you everyone for joining us today. I know that everyone has a lot going on in their lives, so thanks for carving out some time. I'm going to shoot for roughly 30 to 40 minutes of content, and then should leave plenty of time for any questions you guys have. Like Di said, you don't have to wait to put the questions in. You can go ahead and click the Q&A button and go ahead and put a question in as you think of it. That's great. Let's take a look at the poll results here. Let's see. What do we see? So what solutions have you used? So we really see 3 different ways of tackling when you don't have quite enough capacity. Either you're adding more teams, you're going to train up your team on maybe the technologies they're not familiar with, or adding outsourced teams. Looks like that was the winner of that. And then different types of outsourcing. And I'll be talking about all of this. Looks like onshore was the winner there with a pretty dead heat between offshore, nearshore, and hybrid onshore plus offshore, nearshore. So let me dig right in here. So things are a little bit different today, right? We're all faced with a new world of virtual work. Some of us were working from home already. Ascendle happened to be born virtual. All of our team members work virtually. We would certainly meet with clients in their office, and we have a conference space that we use to get together with our clients. That has certainly all changed, and maybe this is a permanent change. Some large companies are already talking about, well, we're going to just go ahead and go virtual for either most of our employees, some of them, or on a rotating basis. So I think most people think, and I believe, that this is not something that's just temporary, that things are going to be a little bit different. So a few questions come to mind. First one is, well, how can we adapt our team structures based on this new world? And the big thing I'm going to be talking about today is focusing on growth. So how do we leverage different team structures and different strategies to drive growth? And I'm also going to talk a little bit about how does that fit in with different stages of growth? Low growth, mid growth, high growth companies. What are the different strategies that you can use for each of those types of phases that you're in? Now, given this new world, now everyone is virtual. So I think in many cases, there's a resistance to outsourcing, particularly if it's not going to be, well, I'm going to get some folks and they're going to sit right here in our office and I can go walk down the hall and see them right over there. And can we actually take advantage of this sort of new paradigm, particularly if you've been faced with some resistance within the organization in the past, and you kind of understand, I want to use this solution, but I'm getting pushback. I don't believe that pushback is warranted, because I think we can get more flexibility and get more done for less if we don't have to get people coming here into the office. And finally, how can we leverage Agile, and sort of the thread throughout this presentation, no surprise, um, given my recent publishing history, uh, we believe that Agile is really the foundation of all success, regardless of the type of development, whether you're doing it internal, nearshore, offshore, onshore, et cetera. If you're not using an Agile approach, not necessarily with all the bells and whistles of a specific Agile process, that's certainly great, but just taking an Agile approach and why that's so important. So as we alluded to in that poll, there's a few different ways we can tackle this. First, we can add new internal teams. So we've worked with companies, they have 200 developers and they come to us and say, well, we need to get more done. And one of the options they talk about is adding more people internally. And I'll talk about the trade-offs of each of these approaches in a minute. The next one is, while I have folks, I actually have some bandwidth available with my teams, but they don't know how to do what we want to do. That could be, we have a legacy application and now we want to move to the cloud, but we have a legacy application. So everybody I have right now knows how to do that technology, but not the latest and greatest technology. We've been building the product for 15 years, and the technology by definition is 15 years old. So I might want to train those folks up so they can actually drive my initiatives forward. Then third, I can add outsourced teams. If I say, you know what, it's going to be too hard or take too long to add some more teams internally, that might be a problem, or it's going to take too long to get folks up to speed. So usually when you're looking at outsourced teams, it's all about speed. I don't have the time to ramp things up and actually get things done. So let's take a look at some of the trade-offs. So the first one is, again, here you'll see the theme is it's all about time. Adding new internal teams is great. Having a team right there within your organization baked into what you're doing all day, every day, and you're spending time with them and they're able to carry things forward, it's great, but it takes a heck of a long time, particularly with recruiting, and it's just difficult to find really good people. Now, if you're moving to a virtual model, you might be able to relax your geography a little bit. If you're looking for folks that are within, say, an hour to an hour and a half drive of the office, that really constrains your geography. And what that means is it's going to take you longer to find folks. And then it's not only getting those people on board, it's getting them trained up, understanding your business, and then getting them to gel, working as a unit and moving things forward. The next is you have the teams, again, you have some availability, but coming up to speed with a new technology is tricky. I've done it. I've done all three of these options. And sure, you can get up to speed generally with the new technology pretty quickly. You know, probably within a week or two, you can spin some code up and look at this Hello World app that I've done in this new technology. But that's not full competence. That's not going full speed. Right, the team simply hasn't had enough time to make the number of mistakes they need to make to really be going at a high rate of speed. Again, going back to the first one, you might be able to recruit and buy that technology, but then you get back to the time frame. So a lot of people look at me funny when I say it takes 1 to 2 years to get a whole team fully up to speed with the new technology. And the bottom line is that that's actually what I've seen in practice. If you can do it faster than that, you're doing pretty well. And then finally, there's the option to outsource. It's going to be a much faster ramp up, but it's not a silver bullet. You might look at that and say, well, I need to get things done fast. Let me just go the outsourcing route. Outsourcing is a huge value, but there's definitely some pitfalls, and it's not a silver bullet. So let's talk a little bit about some different outsourcing options. Again, we kind of alluded to it with the poll there at the beginning. The first one, offshore or nearshore. Offshore is essentially usually somewhere over in Europe or farther east. Nearshore, we're typically talking about some better time zone alignment. Typically South America is what we're talking about there. And just looking at the current rates, $30 to $50 an hour is what you're going to find. You'll probably find some folks outside of this, maybe even as low as $20 to $30 an hour. But for a real solid, mid-level to senior developer and QA, you're going to be paying that sort of thing. Now, for an onshore company, it's sort of the opposite extreme. I'm going to hire the company. Everyone is onshore, US based, and I'm going to pay for that. $150 to $300 an hour is certainly not out of the question. And then there's this other one, which is what I call hybrid, which is a combination of onshore folks and offshore and nearshore. And that's a little bit of a happy medium, kind of the best of both worlds. You have onshore folks that you're working with directly, usually they're, what did someone tell me the other day? They're at the head of the dragon, right? So they're kind of leading the charge. They're working with you directly, and you get a very high degree of attention. And they're going to be native English speakers, and here in the US, so no time zone issues or anything like that. But then they're going to combine that with offshore and nearshore developers and QA. Why? To drive the cost down and to open up the geography. So for example, when we put teams together, we're typically putting teams together based on technology. So we're killing two birds with one stone. One, because we're leveraging offshore and nearshore, we're opening up the realm of possibility from maybe tens of developers in QA that we can identify onshore if we were to advertise, and let's just say within a week, to hundreds, if not thousands, in our network. And then we already bake in the fact that they've been using the technology, whatever the target is for this particular project, for some span of time, typically years. If it's a brand new technology, maybe they've been kind of using it from its inception. So there's a few challenges that you get into with outsourcing. The first one that I've heard over and over is just the quality just wasn't there. It sounded great. We're going to toss this over the fence. Everyone's going to be working while I'm sleeping, and I get the code back, and it's just really not where it needs to be. The next one we hear is, well, they put some stuff together and it pretty much works, but it's not what I wanted. I thought I said, I want A, they built B, so there was some mismatch in there and a communication issue. The other one is visibility. They're off and running. I think they're doing something, but I don't know exactly what's going on. I don't see a lot of updates. I see some documents that come over and that looks great, but where's the code, or where's the software rather? I don't really care about code. I want a product. The schedule can be unpredictable. So going in, they said, yep, we can definitely do this. It's going to take us about 3 to 4 months. 3 to 4 months go by. They've produced nothing, at least nothing in the form of software that I can use and potentially get into users' hands. And then they say, well, we think it's going to be another 4 or 5 months. What? What do you mean? I don't understand. I was making some plans based on this, and it's just not happening. Fitting in with your team and communication issues, that can be a challenge as well, where it doesn't seem like one hand is knowing what the other's doing, and we're sort of not quite gelling as far as our communication goes. Another one is the team may not be using the latest contemporary architecture. They may be using whatever they've been using for years and years. I might not have a lot of input into what that architecture is, and that might not quite be what I'm looking for. And then we also hear problems about start-stop resourcing. So, well, we had some folks, but they got pulled off into something else, and we got to put your project on hold for a couple of weeks. Well, I hired you folks because I need to move this thing forward. I really can't have it just stop dead. Do-overs are really costly, and I can tell you this firsthand. I had an extraordinarily expensive do-over in my history, in my previous life, to the tune of $700,000. So we hired a firm. So we had built a product, and we had built it pretty quickly using some kind of, I would call it basic software development technology. And it was great because we got it into the market and we got some customers, and then we sort of became victims of our own success. We got bigger and bigger and bigger customers, and they put more and more users on the software, and the tech support lines started ringing off the hook. The thing is breaking. We had to invent some patches, and some, nightly maintenance just to keep the thing going. And we said, all right, we got to do something about this. We need to use a real technology. So we talked to an outsourcing firm because what we wanted was speed. We looked at building the team ourselves, figured it was going to take us a while, a year or two, to really ramp things up. Hired the outsourcing firm. They made us all kinds of promises. Yep, no problem. It'll be about a year. It'll cost you about $500,000. No problem. We'll get it done for you. Well, we never really got anything usable. And fast forward a year and a half later and $700,000, and we had, I know now, zero progress because we never got anything that was usable. They had built a lot of framework and written a lot of code, written a lot of documents. But now what I know is that the only measure of progress that actually matters is working, potentially shippable software. So by that measure, they delivered nothing for $700,000. We fired them. We threw it all away. I hired a couple of experts to come in and take a look at what they did. They spent a few weeks looking at it and said, Dave, I hate to break it to you. None of this is worth keeping. You just got to throw it all away and start over. And that was extraordinarily painful. So that talked to really all of those problems on the previous slide. Those are the problems that we ran into. So that's what I mean when I say outsourcing can be great, but it's not a silver bullet, and you really need to know what you're looking for. So the good news is there are a few ways of reducing risk, and I'm going to outline 3 different options for you. The first one is managing the vendor. So you'll hear folks that have been working with vendors for a long time, and they'll say, look, you need to manage the vendor. You can't just assume that they're going to get done what they need to get done for you. What we've seen is that there's really 3 different roles that are necessary to properly manage the vendor. The first one, and I'm using some agile terminology here, the product owner, that's essentially the person who's owning the overall vision. So this is someone in your company. They're talking to stakeholders, both internal stakeholders, end users, customers, et cetera, and figuring out what is it that we want. So a little bit of a combination of business analysts and sort of visionary lead for the team. And they're going to act as an interface between those business stakeholders and the team. They're going to drive the priorities of the outsourced team, and then they're going to inspect everything that comes back. And this, depending on the team size, it might be a part-time job, but for a larger team, it could turn into a full-time job. This is not something where it's like 20 minutes 3 times a week. I mean, our product owners, the folks that are filling this role, they're spending most of each day answering questions, looking at the work, testing the software, and making sure that it's working the way that they expect. Not that it hasn't been tested by the team, there's full quality assurance on the team, but they're trying it out and making sure that it works the way that they expect. The next one is a technical lead, typically a high-end, either senior developer, architect, that sort of role, and they're looking at the code. This prevents the surprise, which is, well, it kind of looked like it was working, but then when my team went to take it over, they said, this is all total crap, and we can't touch any of this. If we touch anything, it's just going to all fall apart. It's just a house of cards. And that's a very real risk. And this particular risk is particularly insidious because, again, it could look great from the outside, but you peel away that shell and you look under the covers, and it's just really, really bad. And it's not going to support where you want to go in the future. So I like to say that this person owns the technical quality of the product, looking at all the code, making sure the architecture is coming together right, and doing code reviews, making sure the automated testing is all in place. So if the product owner is making sure we're building the right product, the technical lead is making sure we're building the product right. And then the final one is Scrum Master, again, an agile Scrum term. Project Manager is the typical role that's most closely aligned with this. The difference is that Scrum Master doesn't tell the team what they're doing every day. They're just orchestrating the work. What we found is that even if the outsourced team says, oh, we've got a project manager, don't worry about it, they're not going to manage the process the way that you expect and the way that you actually need to have it managed to get what you want out of that team. So they're actually going to work with the outsourced team members. They're going to own the Scrum process, and they're going to probably do a little bit of light coaching what we found is that the outsourced team members have differing degrees of experience with Agile. So this is the person that makes sure they're using the right process. Now, sometimes you can combine these roles into fewer people. For example, we actually combine the technical lead and the Scrum Master role into what we call a development lead. Because what we found is that a lot of times the process is kind of contingent on the technology. So for example, needing to understand how the DevOps process works, how continuous integration is working and continuous development, and that's in support of the process. So we found it can be a little bit challenging sometimes when you're working with outsourced developers offshore or nearshore, that you need to be able to drive this, this process into them, or into the team rather, and have them follow it correctly. So the other option you can do is use an onshore vendor. And there's sort of an implied level of expertise here. If you're paying $150 to $300 an hour, you should expect that they're going to have a pretty deep level of expertise. 15 and 25 years or more, native English skills, even if they're not native American speaker, their English is just exceptional. You're not going to run into any sort of communication issues. You're going to have cultural alignment, time zone alignment, etc. The big drawback here is it's going to cost you some money, but you should expect, as I say, you should expect performance. That horror story I talked to you about, that was an onshore company. So an onshore vendor is not a silver bullet either. And you really need to make sure that you're going to get some of the things I talk about later. Third option is the hybrid vendor. Again, a little bit of the best of both worlds. In total transparency, this is the model that we use. We've tried all kinds of different models. I've been doing outsourcing now for, I think, close to, how long has it been? 22 years, something like that. This is the only model that I found that really, really has worked from an outsourcing perspective. The first model works as well if I have the people that I can assign to it and have them work with the offshore or nearshore folks. But when I just don't have that bandwidth, I don't have the bodies to put on this, this is the sort of the pure outsourcing solution that I've found to work and the one that I would recommend. If the vendors have been successful, and the reason I say that is because doing this is actually really hard. Working with offshore and nearshore folks and having your onshore people properly coordinate not only with the client or your stakeholders in the case of doing this internally, and the development team, and making that all work and all the mechanics happen, it's extraordinarily difficult. So if they have in fact pulled it off and they've delighted their other clients, they're pretty much at the top of the game. And I term this strategic development partner. This is the term we use at Ascendle, because it's not just an outsourcer. That actually doesn't do it justice. It really is a partner when this is working correctly, because why? You're putting your trust into this group. You're putting your trust into the onshore folks that they're understanding what you're saying, and you're putting your trust in them that they're going to convey that and kind of oversee and facilitate and orchestrate the work of the offshore and nearshore developers. Because that's what I'm buying. I don't want to see how the sausage is made. I just want to know that you guys are executing. And I'm going to want to see progress pretty routinely, and I'm going to want to play around with that software and know that it's coming together. I'm going to trust but verify. Which is a great segue into, well, how do you know that it's working? What does it look like when it's actually working? Well, the first thing should be, you should never feel like, well, the communication's kind of not really happening. I said X and they never got back to me, or they said Y, and we're just kind of going like this. So you need to feel like that communication is exceptional all the way along. What I like to call extreme ownership. So I don't need to babysit. If I need to babysit, well, why do I have you guys? I could just go directly to an offshore or nearshore team, and I just know I'm going to have to oversee them. When this is working, I shouldn't feel like I need to babysit. At the beginning, I'm going to need to spend some time getting you guys smart, but then it should be I show up every 2 weeks. This looks great. We review the priorities for the next 2 weeks. Still looks good. Oh, you know what? That's become more important. I've talked to some more target customers. Can we bump that one up? Great. Then maybe we hop on one phone call in the next 2 weeks because I need to get some questions answered from you, but that should be it. It shouldn't be you're worrying about it all day, every day. You should get a predictable schedule. And at the very beginning, it might not quite be this accurate, but once things start getting along, it should be accurate to be plus or minus 10%. You should be able to know, okay, this is what I expect, and then you see it actually happen. It can't be, this is going to take 3 months and then it takes 7 months. That's not going to work for anybody. You need to see a demonstration every 2 weeks, and there's a very specific caveat here, which is a demonstration of stuff that actually works and you would feel comfortable with giving to customers because it's at a really high level of quality. Is it going to be perfect? Well, it's software. Software is never perfect. There may be a few bugs that sneak in, but you certainly shouldn't click a button and the thing blows up on the first thing that you try. You need to understand that it's been fully tested and the team's standing behind it and they believe it's ready to go. And that's really this point here. When I say you can use the product, it actually works and it's rock solid. It should also have a contemporary architecture. So you should be able to look at the code or have your technical folks look at the code and say, yeah, this looks pretty good. You know, maybe some of this isn't exactly the way that I would do it, but I see the way you've done it. It's adhering to sort of contemporary principles. I can see how it can be extended. It's solid, etc. And finally, it should have comprehensive unit test coverage, automated unit tests. And another caveat here, the unit tests actually need to test something. We worked with one client where we came in and they told us their horror story, which is they had spent 2 years and a lot of money. It was north of $10 million. And then they threw away their entire project. So they experienced the same thing we did, much bigger scale. What happened is once they started digging into the unit tests, because there were a lot of unit tests automatically testing the product all the way along, and they found that the tests didn't actually test anything. It just said something like, you know, set it up and then return success, set something else up, return success. So it's just return success, return success, return success. It was just total crap. And that is where there was no transparency and no, talk about low code quality. Not only was the code not really working, the unit tests were a complete sham. So these are the things that you should see. You should see all of these and never have any concern about any of these being in place. And you should be able to ask questions and say, oh, sounds good. You guys are doing unit tests, right? Well, show me the tests. I'd like to see them. You know, show me the last run. And you should see, all right, we're up to, you know, we're a little ways into the project and we're up to 186 tests. And here they all are. And your technical folks should be able to go in, look at those tests and look at the code and say, you know, this looks pretty good. So, okay, outsourcing sounds great. Sounds kind of intriguing. Well, what would I use it for? What are some good targets for leveraging outsourcing? So the first thing you can target is maintenance and sustaining of mature products. So we've pretty much halted development of this new product. Well, we can't stop working on it because there's always going to be the annoying bug that's been in there for 5 years and then it just rears its ugly head. Or there might need to be a little bit of an enhancement because some integration just broke because you know, the producer of that API just changed the signatures and doesn't work anymore, or some security or token or certificate or something like that needs to be updated. So if you have a product that's totally been stopped as far as new development goes, this might be a good target, particularly for going direct to offshore and nearshore developers, because you really shouldn't have a ton of oversight required. It shouldn't be, all right, well, I need to explain to you this whole new feature and it's all coming together. And by the way, what we want is kind of changing as we get through this big feature because we're starting to use it. This should be much more, it breaks when you do this. Do these 5 steps, it breaks, it shouldn't break, go in and fix it. So the sort of the characteristic here is I don't need to provide a lot of oversight, and I can kind of fire and forget. I wouldn't encourage you to totally fire and forget. You should still look at, you know, what they're doing and what they're producing. So for new development initiatives, this is a better target for a hybrid partner. Again, it can be tough if you have folks kicking around and they can directly manage the offshore and nearshore contractors. That's great. But again, it's really hard. Trust me, we've been doing it for a long time. It's very challenging. So cloud applications, mobile apps, cloud APIs, sophisticated integrations, basically the new stuff that it's either sort of clean sheet, from scratch, new development in its entirety, like a brand new mobile app, or it's something that's extending an existing product. So one of our clients, for example, has some legacy applications. We've been doing a ton of cloud development, developing microservices, and writing a little bit of code in their legacy application, because that code needs to then talk to the new cloud services that we're building. So it's mostly clean sheet design, a little bit of touch point inside the legacy application, but it's working great because their teams who have the 20 years of knowledge about where all the where all the bodies are buried within the current code base, they're working on the primary development, moving that product along, and we can kind of work on the side and tie in the new technology. So some things that you don't want to do. So if you do have sustaining work and you do have a really complex, it's your big money maker and it's under active development, that's going to be a little bit tricky. You probably could still, leverage an offshore or nearshore team, do a little bit of bug fixing. But I think that as soon as you get into where doing a lot of work, you're going to need to do a lot of care and feeding of that team. So it's fine if you go in with eyes wide open, but I would just be careful about that. And then you've got an existing application and we're doing new, sort of net new development. We're adding new features, adding new functionality. There's a few areas here where it can be a little bit tricky to add in a team and have them work in a safe environment, I'll say. If you don't have a contemporary architecture, it means that things are kind of hacked together. And that means that it's going to be tricky not to break something if you don't know all the history of that, I would say, out-of-date architecture or kind of shaky or fragile architecture. If there's no automated unit testing, you don't know if they broke something. So if you're highly reliant on manual testing, it can be very risky to have someone else's fingers in there. Again, it can be done, but you're back to needing a lot of oversight. And then if you just touch anything in this product, if you need to have been here at least 3 years to know what's going on, that can be another sort of danger zone to get into. So let me talk now about what good targets are based on the sort of the growth phase. If you're in a low growth mode, your challenge is really finding capacity to go after new growth. And we got to ramp up this growth. So a suggestion here is to leverage what Google does, which is the 70-20-10 model. 70% sustaining, 20% exploring growth, and 10% innovating. Good targets for sustaining, like I said, offshore or nearshore. Exploring growth, where it's probably going to need a little bit more institutional knowledge, internal resources. And innovating, this can be a good target for a hybrid partner where they can do the initial work and then hand it off to you. And one of our clients, we did exactly this. They wanted to get into microservices, had no experience with microservices, had no bandwidth to figure it out. We came in, we established the patterns, and we laid the groundwork for the company, which now all new development uses the framework and the patterns that we built for the microservices effort now across all of their teams. So that can be a great way to leverage sort of a jump start, and then we can take it over internally. For mid-growth companies, the challenge is you're kind of divided with your focus. There's distractions, capacity drains. And so here, a three-pronged strategy could make sense. Focusing on what your enterprise clients need, which is going to be a lot of times professional services work. They need some custom integrations. They need some custom reports. This is a pretty good target for the handing over the fence. I can give you a specification. It's a small amount of work. It's not like 3 months to develop this big new feature. And it's kind of more isolated and in a box. For your core products, focusing on paying down technical debt and scaling the architecture, internal resources is probably a better target here, again, because they know how all the machinery is working together, and they're much less likely to break something because they don't quite understand what's happening. And then on the innovation side, where you're exploring new products, complementary products, Maybe you're exploring getting into the cloud, exploring some mobile applications, exploring some cross-device experiences. This is, again, where you can leverage a strategic development partner. So you can kind of see the theme here. It's new, it's innovative, it's leveraging kind of the latest technology, and it's kind of separate. It might be tied into my existing products, but it's kind of separate over here. Those are the good targets. Now, if you're in a high growth mode, you're just trying to keep up, right? You're just trying to keep up with all the new customers that you're getting, all the new sales, all the new rollouts. So in this case, I suggest doing two things at the same time. The first one is evolving your current solution while you're building contemporary architecture. So evolving the current solution, let's attack some low-hanging fruit. Let's pay down some technical debt. Let's de-risk some of the issues that are just going to get right in our way for scaling. While at the same time, let's lay a new foundation. If we need to replace some components in the core of our application, because it's just not going to scale, let me start laying that groundwork, and then I can come along behind it and start implementing those additional features. So great target for internal resources on the left, and another great target for a hybrid development partner on the right. As I mentioned, doing both of these in parallel. All right, so just wrapping up here, what now? Where do you go from here? So the first thing, take a look at your current needs and figure out how to match them up. Use the advice here and figure out how to match each of those challenges and needs up with the right outsourcing technique. Pair these up with your growth strategy, change your resourcing strategy around as necessary, and then adjust your R&D budget to match. So again, forming the strategy, and then how am I going to fund that? And then you need to wash, rinse, repeat. Measure it, see how it's going, iterate, and you might not quite get it right out of the gate. Might need to change and adjust a little bit. As I said at the beginning, underpinning all of this is a degree of Agile maturity. Again, it doesn't really matter which flavor of Agile you're using, whether it's Scrum or Kanban or SAFe or DAD or whatever it might be, whatever buzz phrase you might be using, but having a level of Agile maturity is super important here. I'd say the key component, at the risk of repeating myself, is you got to see work in software. And I would say you got to see work in software every 2 weeks, at most a calendar month at the outside. I'd much rather see every 2 weeks. There's only one measurement that matters: working, potentially shippable software. That's the only yardstick that matters. Doesn't matter how many documents, how many lines of code, how many pieces of the framework have been produced. Give me something I can use and that I believe in. How to do this, if you don't have the ability to do it yourself, you can leverage experts to help transform your organization. Find Agile training and coaching companies. We do some Agile training and coaching. We don't do full-blown Agile transformations. That's not really our deal, but we can help you out. And the other thing that we've seen is that when your software development partner is doing it right, you should actually be inspired by that. You should look at what they're doing and saying, I wonder what I can actually take away from this experience. We get this all the time. Just about 100% of our clients, after they see what our teams can do, they say, can you teach us how to do that? Because we can't quite get to your level of maturity. So usually what happens starting a few months after we engage with our client, we're going in there and we just do free training sessions. So we're just going in and we love to share our secrets to success, how we actually do this. Software development, I'm sure I don't need to tell all of you, is extraordinarily difficult. I've spent 35 years figuring out how to do it. In the last 7, I feel like I figured out how to do it right. So I'll save you about 28 years. I'm gonna help you out. That's a good segue into further reading. I've written down everything about how we do what we do in my book. These are some key chapters that kind of tie into what I've been talking about today. So with that, we'll shift into Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Dave, for that presentation. Appreciate your time.
Of course.
We do have some questions from the audience, so I'll go ahead and feed them to Dave one at a time. We'll stay on as long as it takes, so if you have additional questions, go ahead and put them into the Q&A window. And like I said, you will get a copy of the recording and slide deck from today. So let's get started. First one, what warning signs should be looked for when using an outsourcer?
Yeah, so I was actually just talking to someone the other day, and he's actually talking to outsourcers right now. And we'd have some conversations. I had already told him, look, these are the things that you want. You want something every 2 weeks. You want a predictable schedule. You want to make sure that there's automated tests. And he said, well, I asked them some of those questions, and they said, well, we don't really work like that. We work more like in a 6 to 8 week cadence. Big red warning lights, alarm bells. That's the worst possible answer you can get. If they start pushing back and they say, we can't work in shorter than a 6 to 8 week cadence, right now, they're not going to be able to do what you need to do, because you can't wait 8 weeks to see what they've done, because it's highly likely, I would say almost guaranteed, that at least some part of what they put together, if you're seeing it after 6 to 8 weeks, is going to be wrong. And now they're going to have to go back and rework some of what they've done. The problem is that could be reworking a couple of hours of work, or it could be reworking weeks worth of work. So think about it like this. I've got a ship going across the ocean, and I need them to get over here, but they don't quite know that they need to get here, and they're going off like this. The further off track they're getting, the more it's going to cost in time and money to get them back on. Now they might say, well, you know what? That's on us. We screwed up. We're not going to have you pay for it. We'll get you back on track, but then you've lost that time, and you can't get that time back. So I'd say that's the biggest warning sign, is they push back on giving you something every 2 weeks that you can actually use and it's working. Now, again, right at the beginning, team might need 4 to 6 or even 8 weeks to kind of just get going and get ramped up, and you get the foundation put together, figure out everything that they need to know from you. But once they start cranking, they should be saying, oh yeah, no problem, 2 weeks. Yep, that's what we do. Say the other big warning sign is if you talk about automated testing and they kind of say, well, we do a little bit of automated testing, and we found that that's not really important. We'll manually test it, don't worry. The problem is that if they don't do automated testing right from the beginning, they're actually digging a hole that's going to be extraordinarily difficult for you to dig out of. And you're going to need to dig out of it, whether it's your own team taking it over at some point or paying them to dig out of that hole. So have some technical folks do some spot checks, particularly early on. Look at how much of the code is being executed by those unit tests. It should be everything that I like to say, has logic in it. If then, case this, or calculations. All right, I need to do this and got to calculate this. So any sort of logic, 100% of all that should be covered. That doesn't mean 100% unit tests coverage of every single line of code, but everything that has any meat to it should be 100% covered. If it's not, and when I say covered, I mean executed by these automated tests. If it's not executed, no one knows if it works unless you manually test it, and you're not going to manually test the whole product all the time.
Great. Okay. This next one I like a lot. I'm a non-technical startup founder. We have an app idea with funding. Should I consider building my own development team or outsourcing?
Yeah, great question here. I talk to probably 3 or 4 of these folks every week. Got an idea, non-technical. I don't have a technical co-founder. So a few different options. One, you can go find a technical co-founder. That can be hit or miss. It's really hard to find a technical co-founder. I get calls frequently saying, hey, do you have any extra bandwidth to help me out with my new company? I'm a little bit busy here with Ascendle as we're continuing to grow. But I would say that ideally, you should figure out how to work with an outside company. I'm very skeptical of non-technical founders being able to properly manage offshore and nearshore contractors. What I would much rather do is, and this is totally self-serving, but again, I built Ascendle the way I did because I believe it's the best way to build software if you don't have the bandwidth internally or the technical know-how. I think working with a hybrid software development firm and keeping the engagement very small, keep it to 13 weeks and work with that company. The company is actually going to allow you to go faster. So we worked with a company that had a legacy application. They spent 5 years building it. They wanted to move to a new technology platform, cloud, everything mobile. We relaunched the product in 8 months. So we did in fact shave over 4 years of development from relaunching it. It's not because we did the same exact thing, it's because we actually understand the strategy of the minimum viable product. We were able to get functionality into end users' hands that they started using, and then we could get some traction and, more important, revenue, and then we can use that revenue to continue building the product. So if you're a non-technical startup founder, I'd strongly encourage you to work with us. Even if you don't have any money yet, I'd be more than happy to spend a couple of hours with you and just give you some tips, have you prioritize and keep yourself out of trouble. And then maybe you do need, because you just don't have any money besides what you've scrapped together with friends and family, you might need to just start getting something built with an outsourced team, but I'd love to help you out.
Great. Next question. What do I look for to find a quality firm? Cost, experience?
Well, you definitely don't want to go cost first, because that's an easy answer. I can go find people in 24 hours for $20 an hour, actually less than that, for $12 an hour that can write code, supposedly. And they might even be pretty good. There might be some senior developers somewhere out there in the world, $12 an hour. Great. I guarantee you, you will fail. Even if you have our level of experience, that would be pretty tricky. Usually the $12 an hour resource is going to be somewhere where they're on the opposite side of the clock. Communication is going to be a challenge. Quality might be questionable. So cost-wise, the answer is easy. Offshore or nearshore, just go directly. But you got to look at, well, what am I actually going to get? Am I going to get the product that I need in the time that I need it, without a lot of oversight by me, especially if I don't have the time to do it or I don't have the expertise to do it? So I would look at not only experience, I would look at those key success indicators. I would ask those questions. I would say, all right, can you give me something every 2 weeks? How long is it going to take? Do you have a guarantee? So we guarantee our work. If we work in a 2-week production cycle and we deliver a product to you and you look at it and say, you guys didn't actually really deliver any business value. This is, for some reason, let's just say we totally screwed up. We built the wrong thing. We need to go and fix it up. We're not going to charge you. We have a guarantee we're not going to charge you anything if we don't deliver business value. If for some reason we miss a bunch of bugs and we spend those 2 weeks fixing bugs that we introduced the last 2 weeks, not going to charge you. So the other thing I would ask is, will you guarantee your work? What happens if you deliver something to me and it's just not what I wanted and it's not going to work? And what you want to hear is, oh, you won't pay for that. You're only going to pay for results in the form of shippable software.
Great. Okay. What are more asked technologies nearshore?
All right, so I'm assuming this is popular technologies today. On the web development side of things, it's typically Angular or React on the front end, Node.js and .NET Core on the back end. Those are the things that we get asked about. On the mobile app side, we don't get asked as much about specific technologies. It's more about, can you build for iOS and Android? How would that work? Can you also build for other devices such as, Apple TV or Android TV and things like that? So, and then in some cases, it's on the cloud side, on sort of the back end platform development side. That's going to be more about, do you know about Docker and Kubernetes and microservice architecture and scaling and that sort of thing. So to sum it up, I would say it's those three. On the website, Angular, React, .NET Core, Node.js. On the mobile app side, more about, can you build this type of app on this platform? Sometimes can you integrate with this specific type of hardware? And then on the platform side, it's usually microservices and or specific services on Azure or AWS.
Great. All right, we have a few more here. Where does the client's role fit into the project?
Yeah, so what we can't do is we can't live in your world and understand everything going back 5 years. So we don't know, or any outsourcing firm, we don't know, or development partner rather, we don't understand all of the drivers, all the business drivers. So we need you to help us out. We need you to make us smart. It's not weeks and weeks and weeks. Typically when we get engaged with a new client, we're spending, in the first, say, 3 or 4 weeks, we're spending maybe 3 or 4 2-hour meetings together. And then the rest of it, we kind of figure out along the way as we work side by side. The other one is you need to look at what we're producing, because again, we're taking all of your input and we are giving back to you what it is that we thought you asked for, but we might not have totally understood what you asked for. We do everything we can to make sure that that happens, but sometimes, we miss some piece of it. So I think the other thing that the client needs to understand is this is not fire and forget. Fire and forget, where you're abdicating your responsibility, kind of letting that go, is much different than letting us take it off your plate. So again, you shouldn't expect to micromanage the right team, but you also shouldn't say, well, I'll see you guys in 6 months, good luck. You need to have enough bandwidth where you're going to participate in that review every 2 weeks, where you're looking at it, you're going to facilitate showing it around to other stakeholders, you're going to give us feedback, and you're going to be available for questions. We answer 90% of the questions that the development team has day in and day out. If you looked at our Slack channel, it's all day long, questions and discussions. We shield you from about 90% of that, if not 95%. But when we have a question, we're going to need to go back to you in some cases. We need you to be responsive.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, from Bill, when Ascendle brings in resources from other countries to assist on projects, are there any particular locations you prefer? Is it technology/skill set dependent per location?
Yeah, we do have some favorites. I'd say if I needed to pick one, it would be Eastern Europe. Eastern European, I like to say they converted their education system that was training rocket scientists, and now they're training computer scientists. The level of education is great. Their verbal and written communication skills are great. They'll swear up and down, oh, my English is terrible. And I'm thinking, I understand about 99.2% of what you're saying, so you're fine. The work ethic that we've seen is amazing. We've had to kick our developers out of their office in Eastern Europe on some Friday nights because they just were there till all hours of the night. And they really engage with the team. They're really a collaborative. They're gonna bring their ideas to the table. They're not gonna kind of be shy about it. And so Eastern Europe is great, great pricing, lots of resources available. We've also been using South America a little bit more lately, the nearshore option. What's really nice about that is more time zone alignment. So Eastern Europe, they're usually about 7 hours ahead of us here on the East Coast, where South America is typically going to be within plus or minus an hour of East Coast time. So that can be a really nice overlap. And we're still exploring South America. I don't think we found quite as many resources there as we have in Eastern Europe, but we like both of those. So South America, it's less about the specific country. Same thing with Eastern Europe. So we've used Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, a handful of others. It's really more about just kind of that region in general. And then South America, we've had luck with multiple companies as well.
Great. How do we avoid losing control if I go with an outside firm?
Well, this ties back into we're going to go off for 6 to 8 weeks, and then we'll, kind of give you something. Again, I said the most important measure of progress is the working product. It's also the most important thing for you to make sure that you have control, right? Because if you go 2 weeks and they're producing the wrong thing, well, that's really what you want to control, right? First and foremost, you want to control the fact that they're building the right product. If they're not building the right product, you need to control that getting back on track. And if they're not getting back on track, well, you're going to be able to fail fast. So I think, again, the number one critical success factor is short iterations. 2 weeks is ideal. Calendar month is okay, but that's starting to get a little bit too long. And what are the other things you can control? I want to control the code quality, or at least understand that the code quality is coming together, the architecture. You should expect that you've got total transparency. So if you say, hey, can you give me access to the code repository? Or, can you use our code repository? I want our code that you're writing for me in our code repository. You shouldn't get any pushback about that. If you say, you know what, can we do a technical review every 2 or 3 weeks? They should say, sure. There'll be a little bit of time that it takes us that we wouldn't otherwise be heads down. But yeah, sure. We'll walk you through the code and show you how that all works. Thank you, Clint. Appreciate you taking the time.
All right, looks like just one more. How much time does it typically take to assemble a team for a project?
So this is somewhat dependent on the technologies. If it's really sort of a very specific technology that's not in wide use, that's going to take a little bit longer. Usually for us, if it's more kind of typical technology, the ones I was rattling off earlier, it's going to take us about 2 to 4 weeks. So how we usually work with a new client is we get engaged, and then we go ahead and we start working on nailing down the big picture. We do a little bit of upfront planning to just kind of set the stage. We don't do months and months. 4 to 6 weeks is typical. As soon as we start going with the client, in fact, as soon as we sign a new contract with a client, we start assembling the team. So usually within those 4 to 6 weeks, we're actually able to ramp up the team, get them smart about what it is that we're building, get them into the code, get them all lined up. So at that 4 to 6 week mark, they're ready to go. So I would say in terms of the actual calendar time, it can be 2 weeks. I would say 2 to 6 weeks is the time to assemble the team and get them ready to go.
Excellent. It looks like all of our questions. So thank you, everyone. Those are great questions. We appreciate the participation. Thank you for attending. As we said, we will get out an email with a link to this recording and slide deck. Thanks a lot, Dave, for sharing your knowledge with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.